In the shadowy depths of World War II's vast oceanic battlefields, where the fate of nations hung on the fragile threads of supply lines and naval supremacy, one vessel emerged as a silent harbinger of destruction. This was no ordinary ship, but a sleek, deadly machine forged in the shipyards of Nazi Germany, the U-181. A Type 9D2 U-boat designed for long-range operations far from home waters. Commissioned in the spring of 1942 under the command of the legendary Kapitänleutnant Wolfgang Luth, U-181 would go on to etch its name in the annals of naval warfare, claiming an astonishing 27 merchant ships and over 138,000 tons of Allied shipping. But its story is not just one of triumphs at sea. It's a tale of cunning strategy, relentless pursuit, and an ironic twist of fate that saw it survive the war only to meet its end in the turbulent waters of post-war intrigue. Today, we dive into the saga of this submarine that terrorized the oceans and uncover where its wreckage lies now, silent and forgotten beneath the waves. To understand the rise of U-181, we must first step back into the crucible of war that shaped it. By 1942, Adolf Hitler's Kriegsmarine was locked in a desperate struggle against the Allied convoys that sustained Britain's war effort and fueled the growing American involvement. The Battle of the Atlantic was raging, with U-boats, the infamous wolf packs, prowling the seas like predators in search of prey. But Germany needed more than just numbers. It required vessels capable of striking deep into enemy territories, disrupting trade routes in distant oceans like the Indian Ocean and the waters off South Africa. Enter the Type 9D2 class. These were the long-legged hunters of the U-boat fleet, equipped with powerful diesel engines for surface speed and electric motors for stealthy underwater attacks. Measuring over 87 meters in length, with a displacement of 1,610 tons surfaced and 1,799 tons submerged, U-181 could cruise up to 23,700 nautical miles at 10 knots, enough to circle the globe and still have range to spare. Armed with 6 torpedo tubes, 4 at the bow and 2 at the stern, plus a 10.5-centimeter deck gun, anti-aircraft weapons, and the capacity for 24 torpedoes, it was a floating arsenal built for endurance and lethality. The keel of U-181 was laid down on March 15, 1941, at the A.G. Wesser shipyard in Bremen, a bustling hub of German naval production amid the constant threat of Allied bombing raids. Workers toiled day and night, hammering steel plates and installing intricate machinery under the watchful eyes of engineers loyal to the Reich. Launched on December 30, 1941, in the bitter cold of a European winter, the submarine slid into the water with little fanfare, just another cog in Hitler's war machine. But its commissioning on May 9, 1942, marked the beginning of something extraordinary. Assigned to the 4th U-boat flotilla for training in Stettin, the crew, a mix of seasoned sailors and fresh recruits, underwent rigorous drills in the Baltic Sea. They practiced crash dives, torpedo launches, and evasion tactics, forging the unbreakable bond that would carry them through the perils ahead. At the helm was Wolfgang Luth, a man whose name would become synonymous with U-boat excellence. Born in 1913 in Riga, Latvia, Luth had risen through the ranks with a blend of tactical brilliance and unyielding discipline. By the time he took command of U-181, he was already a decorated ace, having sunk numerous ships on previous patrols. Luth was known for his innovative approaches. He emphasized silent running, precise calculations for torpedo shots, and a philosophy of shoot first, ask questions later when opportunities arose. Under his leadership, the crew of about 50 men, engineers, torpedo men, radio men, and cooks, transformed into a well-oiled unit. Life aboard a U-boat was grueling, cramped quarters reeking of diesel fuel and sweat, constant humidity that bred mold on every surface, and the ever-present danger of depth charges that could crush the hull like a tin can. Yet morale was high as they prepared for their first combat patrol, fueled by propaganda tales of glory and the promise of iron crosses for victories. On September 12, 1942, U-181 slipped out of its base in Kiel, Germany, under the cover of darkness, bound for the southern Atlantic and the treacherous waters off South Africa. This was no short jaunt. The patrol would last over 4 months, testing the limits of man and machine. As the submarine crossed the equator, the crew celebrated the traditional crossing the line ceremony, with King Neptune rituals to initiate the pollywogs into the realm of seasoned sailors. But festivities were short-lived. By early October, U-181 had reached the Cape of Good Hope, a vital choke point for Allied shipping carrying oil, food, and war materials from the Middle East and Asia to Europe. The waters here were a hunter's paradise. Convoys often sailed unescorted or lightly guarded, relying on speed and zigzagging to evade detection. Luth's first strike came on October 13, 1942, when U-181 spotted the British steamer Ikoku Maru. Wait, no, let's correct that from the records. Actually, one of the early victims was the Trekeeve, a British cargo ship laden with coal and general goods. Surfacing at night to maximize surprise, Luth ordered a surface attack, the deck gun booming in the darkness as shells ripped into the target's hull. But torpedoes were the true weapon of choice. On November 3, 1942, U-181 claimed its first major kill. The American freighter East Indian, 8,159 tons, carrying military supplies, canceled its rent on the surface. The torpedo slammed into her side with a deafening explosion, sending plumes of water skyward as the ship listed and began to sink. Crewmen scrambled into lifeboats, their cries echoing over the waves as U-181 circled like a shark, ensuring the kill before diving to avoid any rescuers. This was just the beginning. Over the next weeks, Luth orchestrated a series of devastating attacks. On November 8th, the Plaudit, a Norwegian tanker of 5,600 tons, fell victim to a fan shot of torpedoes, a spread designed to increase hit probability. The oil slick that spread across the sea burned for hours, a fiery testament to the U-boat's prowess. Then came the Excello on November 9th, another American ship at 4,969 tons, her cargo of grain and machinery destined for Allied troops, now consigned to the deep. Luth's tactics were masterful. He often approached on the surface under moonlight, using the U-boat's low silhouette to remain unseen until the last moment. By November 13th, the Gunda, a Swedish neutral vessel mistakenly identified in the chaos, added 3,921 tons to the tally, though neutrals were fair game if suspected of aiding the enemy. As the patrol continued into December, the successes mounted. The Amaryllis on November 19th, a British cargo liner of 7,000 tons. The Cleaneth on November 28th, Greek-flagged at 4,153 tons. And the Avanthia on December 5th, another Greek ship weighing 3,551 tons. Each sinking was a blow to the Allied war effort, disrupting supply chains and forcing precious escorts to be diverted from other theaters. But danger lurked everywhere. On November 15, 1942, U-181 was depth-charged by a trio of British corvettes, HMS Jasmine, HMS Inconstant, and HMS Nigella, after being spotted by aircraft. The explosions rocked the submarine, leaking pipes and flickering lights, plunging the crew into terror. Luth ordered a deep dive to 200 meters beyond the hull's tested limits as depth charges rained down like thunder. Miraculously, they escaped with minor damage, a testament to German engineering and Luth's cool head. By mid-December, the tally stood at 11 ships sunk during this first patrol, totaling over 50,000 tons. The crew, exhausted but exhilarated, turned for home, navigating through minefields and patrolled waters. On January 18, 1943, U-181 docked back in Bordeaux, France, greeted as heroes. Luth was promoted and awarded the Knight's Cross with Oaks and Swords, one of the highest honors in the Kriegsmarine. Whispers spread through the U-boat pens. This boat is lucky, its commander invincible. Little did they know that the seas ahead would grow even more perilous as Allied anti-submarine technology, radar, sonar, and hedgehog mortars began to turn the tide. But for now, U-181 rested, its hull patched and torpedoes reloaded, preparing for the next hunt. The war was far from over, and this predator had only just begun to show its teeth. In the coming patrols, it would venture deeper into enemy waters, claiming more victims and weaving a legacy of destruction that would span oceans. Yet its fate had a cruel irony in store for this mighty U-boat, a post-war demise that would leave it lost to the depths, its final resting place a mystery until modern times.
Fresh from the hero's welcome in Bordeaux, U-181 underwent repairs and refitting in the fortified U-boat pens, those massive concrete bunkers that defied Allied bombers. The crew, many still buzzing from the accolades, reloaded torpedoes, stocked provisions, and prepared for what would become one of the most grueling and successful patrols of the entire war. On March 23, 1943, under the command of the newly promoted Korvettenkapitan Wolfgang Luth, U-181 slipped out of Bordeaux once more, heading south through the Atlantic, past the Canary Islands, and around the Cape of Good Hope into the vast Indian Ocean. This second patrol would last an astonishing 205 days, the second longest U-boat mission of the war, covering over 24,000 nautical miles. It was a journey into the unknown, far from any friendly bases, where resupply would come only from secretive rendezvous with German blockade runners, and every decision could mean life or death for the 55 men aboard. As U-181 crossed into warmer waters, the routine settled in. Endless watches, maintenance in stifling heat, and the constant hunt for targets. Luth, ever the disciplinarian, maintained strict regimens to keep his crew sharp, mandatory exercises on deck when safe, controlled rations of fresh water, and even rules on reading material to boost morale without distractions. The Indian Ocean was a new frontier for the Kriegsmarine's Monsoon Group, a handful of long-range U-boats sent to disrupt Allied shipping routes vital for the British Empire's lifeline from India, Australia, and the Middle East. Convoys here were often lightly escorted, stretched thin by the demands of multiple theaters. The first kills came in May 1943 off the coast of Madagascar. On May 8th, Luth spotted the British steamer Laconicus, 3,803 tons, laden with coal. A single torpedo struck true, sending her to the bottom with most of her crew. Days later, on May 15th, the American Liberty ship William King, over 7,000 tons and carrying war materials, fell victim in a textbook submerged attack. Luth's precision was legendary. He calculated firing solutions with mathematical accuracy, often waiting hours for the perfect angle. By late May, more successes. The Dutch Sikkeborg on May 27th, 1,982 tons, and the British Harrier on May 30th, another cargo hauler erased from the seas. June brought refueling from the supply ship Charlotte Schliemann east of Mauritius, a risky operation in broad daylight, transferring fuel hoses while both vessels rolled in heavy swells. Fully replenished, U-181 pressed on toward the Mozambique Channel and the approaches to Durban and Lorenzo Marques, now Maputo. This was prime hunting ground, ships carrying chrome ore from South Africa, vital for Allied steel production, and oil from the Persian Gulf. The pace intensified. On July 3rd, the Greek steamer Maria E., 4,737 tons. July 9th, the British Hoihau, 2,873 tons. July 13th, the American Walter Q. Gresham, a massive 7,197-ton Liberty ship packed with explosives and munitions. Her sinking lit up the night sky in a massive fireball. Luth noted in his log the satisfaction of denying the enemy such critical cargo. Then came July 15th, the British Empire Lake, 7,504 tons, and the South African Dakota on July 23, 6,223 tons. Each attack was methodical, surface runs at night for speed, diving at dawn to evade aircraft, which were becoming more frequent as Allied air patrols expanded. But the ocean fought back as fiercely as the enemy. Tropical storms battered the boat, humidity turned every compartment into a sauna, and provisions spoiled faster than anticipated. The crew battled scurvy with vitamin tablets and whatever fresh fruit they could scavenge from sinkings. Luth shared the hardships, often going without to ensure his men stayed strong. On August 4th, another prize, the British Dalfram, 4,558 tons, and on August 7th, the Umvuma, 1,921 tons. 10 ships sunk on this patrol alone, totaling over 45,000 tons, a staggering achievement that pushed U-181's overall tally toward legendary status. Yet peril was never far. Allied hunter-killer groups, equipped with better radar and direction-finding gear, prowled these waters. On several occasions, U-181 detected aircraft or destroyers closing in, forcing emergency dives and silent running for hours. Leaks sprang in the pressure hull from the strain of deep evasions, and the diesel engines groaned under constant use. Luth's calm leadership held them together. He was known to play classical music over the intercom during tense moments to steady nerves. As the patrol wore on into September, the crew grew gaunt, beards unkempt, uniforms threadbare. They crossed the equator again, bound for home, but not before one final rendezvous for fuel. On October 14, 1943, after 205 days at sea, a feat that tested the limits of endurance, U-181 docked in Bordeaux. The boat was a shadow of its former self, barnacles encrusting the hull, but the crew emerged as heroes once more. Luth, now the recipient of the Knight's Cross with oaks, leaves, and swords, the highest honor, shared by only a handful, was hailed as one of the Kriegsmarine's greatest aces. His 2 patrols on U-181 had accounted for 22 ships and over 100,000 tons sunk, crippling Allied supply lines in a theater where every ton lost hurt deeply. The men of U-181 knew they had achieved something extraordinary. Whispers in the pens spoke of invincibility, of Luth's unbreakable luck. But Luth himself stepped ashore for the last time as commander, reassigned to train the next generation. A new captain would take U-181 to sea, venturing even farther east into the heart of the Japanese-held Pacific. The war was shifting. Allied convoys grew safer in the Atlantic, but opportunities beckoned in the Far East. Little did they know that U-181's greatest adventures and its ultimate fate still lay ahead in waters where the rising sun flew alongside the swastika. As the boat prepared for its next chapter under Kurt Friwald, carrying precious cargo and technology to bolster the Axis alliance, the crew could reflect on the legacy they had built. But the seas are unforgiving, and even the mightiest predators eventually meet their end. In the years to come, U-181 would sail into history's shadows, only to resurface in a new form, before vanishing forever beneath the waves of the post-war world.
With Wolfgang Luth reassigned to higher duties ashore, the mantle of command for U-181 passed to Fregattenkapitän Kurt Friwald in November 1943. Friwald was no novice. A veteran U-boat officer who had commanded smaller boats earlier in the war, he brought a steady hand and deep experience to this long-range predator. The crew, many of whom had sailed with Luth through hell and high water, adjusted to the change amid the fortified pens of Bordeaux. By now, the Atlantic was becoming a graveyard for U-boats, Allied convoys bristling with escorts, aircraft patrolling relentlessly with radar that pierced the night. The Kriegsmarine's focus shifted eastward to the Monsoon Group operating from Japanese-held bases in the Indian Ocean and Pacific. U-181, with its exceptional range, was perfectly suited for this new theater, far from the tightening noose in home waters. On November 1, 1943, U-181 departed Bordeaux for what would be a perilous voyage to Penang in occupied Malaya. This patrol was different, not just a hunt, but a strategic relocation to join forces with the Imperial Japanese Navy. Loaded with extra supplies, advanced radar detectors like the Naxos system, and even a Boxstelze rotary wing kite for extended spotting, the submarine slipped past Gibraltar under the cover of darkness, evading the heavy Allied patrols in the strait. The journey south was tense. Allied hunter-killer groups roamed the Atlantic, and any surfaced run for battery charging risked detection. Freyvald's tactics mirrored Luth's precision, but adapted to the changing war. Opportunities arose sporadically in the vast Indian Ocean. The first kill under his command came in early 1944, a lone merchant straggling from a convoy, torpedoed cleanly in the dead of night. Over the months, U-181 claimed 4 more victims, tankers and freighters carrying vital rubber, oil, and ores, totaling nearly 25,000 tons. One notable sinking was a large British cargo ship, her holds packed with wartime supplies bound for India. The torpedo strikes were devastating, the explosions lighting up the horizon as survivors took to lifeboats in shark-infested waters. But the ocean was vast, and escorts were learning. Freyvald often opted for caution, diving deep at the first hint of aircraft or sonar pings. The crew endured the familiar hardships amplified by the tropical heat, sweat-soaked bunks, rationed water, and the constant drone of engines pushing them eastward. After months at sea, dodging storms and patrols, U-181 finally docked at Penang on August 8, 1944, a momentous arrival in the heart of Japanese territory. Photos from that day show the battle-worn submarine tying up at Swedham Pier, her crew gaunt but proud, greeted by curious Japanese officers. The swastika flew alongside the rising sun, a rare symbol of Axis cooperation in the Far East. Transferred to the 33rd U-boat flotilla based in Asian waters, U-181 underwent repairs in the humid docks. The monsoon boats faced unique challenges: limited spares, unfamiliar allies, and increasing Allied air superiority over the Indian Ocean. Yet the submarine was soon ready for action again. On October 19, 1944, Freyvald took U-181 out on its final combat patrol, a mission loaded with strategic importance. This time, space for torpedoes was limited. The boat carried precious cargo for the return to Germany, over 130 tons of tin, 20 tons of molybdenum, 80 to 100 tons of raw rubber, and cutting-edge radar equipment like the Naxos detector. These materials were critical for the Reich's war industry, starved of resources by blockades. With room for only a handful of torpedoes, opportunities were scarce, but Freyvald made one count. In late 1944, U-181 intercepted an American tanker, a massive 10,198-ton vessel plodding through the waves with fuel for Allied forces pushing into the Pacific. 2 torpedoes were all it took. The explosions ripped open her side, igniting her cargo in a massive inferno that burned for hours. It was a final defiant strike, pushing U-181's total to 27 merchant ships sunk across its career, over 138,000 tons of Allied shipping sent to the bottom, a record that placed it among the deadliest U-boats of the war. As 1945 dawned, the patrol continued amid growing desperation. News from Europe trickled in via radio, the Allies advancing, U-boat bases falling. Freyvald steered U-181 back towards Singapore for repairs and refit, arriving safely despite the encroaching threat. The boat was in the docks when word came of Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945. For the crew, it was a moment of stunned silence, their war over, far from home, in a Japanese stronghold that would soon face its own reckoning. In the chaotic days that followed, U-181 fell into Japanese hands. On July 15, 1945, even as atomic bombs were being prepared thousands of miles away, the submarine was commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy as I-501. The German crew trained their new Japanese counterparts, handing over the intricate workings of this advanced Type 9 D2 vessel. But Japan's surrender on August 15th came swiftly after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I-501, barely operational under its new flag, was surrendered to British forces in Singapore without firing a shot in Japanese service. The end was anticlimactic for such a fearsome warrior.
Under the terms of the Potsdam Agreement, captured Axis submarines were to be destroyed to prevent future use. Stripped of valuable equipment by her former German crew under British supervision, I-501 awaited her fate. On February 15, 1946, Royal Navy frigates towed the submarine out of Singapore harbor into the Strait of Malacca. Charges were placed, and the I-181, the all-once mighty U-181, the predator that had claimed 27 lives from the sea, was scuttled, sinking beneath the waves in a final plunge. Today, the wreck of U-181, ex-I-501, lies in the depths of the Strait of Malacca, off the coast of Malaysia, a busy shipping lane where few know of the silent hunter resting below. Undisturbed and largely forgotten, its exact position remains uncharted for the public, a war grave claimed by the sea that it once terrorized.
While U-181 carved its deadly path across the oceans, claiming 27 merchant vessels and sending more than 138,000 tons of shipping to the seabed, the true measure of its terror was not just in tonnage or tactical brilliance, but in the human lives forever altered by its torpedoes. Behind every explosion, every listing hull, and every oil-slicked sea lay stories of ordinary men thrust into extraordinary horror. Seamen from dozens of nations, many far from home, who paid the ultimate price for keeping the Allied war machine alive. In this chapter, we turn our gaze from the hunter to the hunted, exploring the human cost of U-181's reign, the survivors' harrowing tales, and the quiet grief that lingered long after the guns fell silent. The merchant marine was the unsung backbone of the Allied effort. These were not trained combatants in uniform, but civilian sailors, British, Norwegian, Greek, American, Indian, Chinese, and more, who braved the most dangerous waters of the war to deliver food, fuel, oil, ammunition, and raw materials. They sailed knowing the risks: no convoy escorts for many in the distant Indian Ocean, no parachutes, no glory. When a torpedo struck, there was no time for heroics, only frantic scrambling for lifeboats in burning oil or shark-filled seas. Take the sinking of the American Liberty ship Walter Q. Gresham on July 13, 1943. Loaded with explosives and munitions bound for the Middle East, she was steaming alone off the Mozambique coast when Lutz torpedoes found her. The detonation was catastrophic. A massive fireball erupted, shattering the ship and hurling men into the inferno. Of her crew of 70, only 26 survived, clinging to rafts as flames raged around them. Rescued days later, they spoke of bodies burned beyond recognition and the deafening silence after the blast. One survivor recalled watching the ship's dog desperately swimming through flaming oil, a small but heartbreaking detail amid the carnage. Days earlier, on July 3rd, the Greek steamer Maria E met a similar fate. Torpedoed without warning, she sank rapidly. Most of her crew perished, but a handful reached a lifeboat. For 9 days they drifted under the merciless tropical sun, thirst and exposure claiming more lives, until a passing ship spotted them. Such stories were repeated across U-181's victims. The British Empire Lake sunk on July 15, 1943, with heavy loss of life. The Panamanian-flagged Amaryllis, whose survivors endured weeks adrift before rescue. Not all encounters ended in total tragedy. On occasion, Lutz's humanity surfaced amid the cold calculus of war. After sinking ships, he sometimes surfaced to provide water, food, directions to the nearest land, or even medical aid to wounded survivors, acts that stood in stark contrast to the ruthless efficiency of many U-boat commanders. Survivors of the Norwegian tanker Plaudit, sunk in November 1942, later recounted how U-181 approached their lifeboats, handed over provisions, and pointed them toward the African coast. Lute reportedly asked about missing crewmen and expressed regret when told some had perished. These moments of compassion earned him quiet respect even among former enemies, though they did nothing to lessen the devastation his boat inflicted. Life aboard U-181 itself was a trial by fire.
The 50 to 55 men crammed into a steel tube endured conditions that tested body and mind. Fresh water was rationed to a few liters per day. Showers were a distant memory. The air grew thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and the stench of unwashed bodies. Mold covered everything, food spoiled quickly in the heat, and sleep came in short bursts on hard bunks while the boat rocked through storms. Tropical patrols brought new miseries, heat rash, fungal infections, and the constant buzz of insects when surfaced in harbor. Yet camaraderie bound them. They celebrated birthdays with whatever treats the cook could conjure, listened to Lute read adventure novels aloud during quiet moments, and marked equator crossings with elaborate ceremonies. Many were young, teenagers serving as machinists or lookouts, dreaming of home they might never see again. Letters from loved ones were treasured, read and reread until the paper wore thin. The psychological strain was immense, the knowledge that one depth charge could end it all, the guilt of sinking defenseless ships, the isolation from a world increasingly turning against Germany. As the war progressed, the crew's world shrank. News of defeats on the Eastern Front and Allied bombings of German cities filtered through radio broadcasts. Morale wavered, but discipline held. When Lute left the boat in 1943, many felt a profound loss. He had been more than a commander. He was a father figure whose calm presence steadied them through the worst. Under Frywald, the tone shifted slightly, still professional, but without Lute's almost mystical aura of invincibility. For the families of the sunken ship's crews, closure was rare. Hundreds perished without trace, their names etched on memorials like the Tower Hill Memorial in London or the Merchant Marine Memorial in New York. Mothers, wives, and children waited for letters that never came, clinging to hope until official telegrams dashed it. The war's end brought no victory parades for merchant sailors, only quiet grief and the slow realization that their sacrifice had helped turn the tide. U-181's legacy is thus dual, a testament to German engineering and tactical skill, but also a grim reminder of industrialized killing at sea. It sank ships from a dozen nations, disrupted vital supply lines, and forced the Allies to divert resources to protect distant routes. Yet for every ton sunk, lives were shattered on both sides of the periscope. As the submarine itself met its quiet end in the Strait of Malacca, scuttled without fanfare in 1946, the stories of those it hunted and those who hunted aboard it faded into obscurity. But beneath the busy shipping lanes today, the wreck remains a silent monument to the human toll of a war fought not just on battlefields, but across the vast and unforgiving oceans.
As the wreck of U-181 settled into the silt of the Strait of Malacca in February 1946, one of the most successful and longest-ranging U-boats of the Second World War faded into history. With 27 merchant ships sunk totaling more than 138,000 gross register tons, U-181 stands among the elite predators of the Kriegsmarine, a machine of war that struck fear across 3 oceans and helped prolong Germany's desperate fight long after the Battle of the Atlantic had turned decisively against the U-boats. In this final chapter, we reflect on its remarkable record, compare it to other legendary submarines, examine the enduring legacy of its commanders and crew, and reveal what little is known today about the exact location of its final resting place beneath one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. To put U-181's achievements in perspective, consider the giants of the U-boat arm. The undisputed ace was Otto Kretschmer of U-99, who sank 47 ships totaling over 272,000 tons, but almost entirely in the brutal close-quarters combat of the North Atlantic in 1940–1941. Similarly, Wolfgang Luth's overall career tally across multiple boats reached 46 ships and over 225,000 tons, making him the second most successful U-boat commander of the war. Yet what sets U-181 apart is that a single vessel, under 2 commanders, accounted for 27 sinkings in far-flung waters where targets were sparse and escorts often absent.
Most high-scoring U-boats operated in the happy time of 1940–1942. U-181 achieved its greatest successes in 1943 and 1944, when Allied defenses had vastly improved and the Indian Ocean was no longer the easy hunting ground it had once been. Among long-range Type 9 boats, U-196 and U-198 of the Monsoon Group also scored heavily in the Indian Ocean, but neither matched U-181's endurance or consistency. Its second patrol of 205 days remains the second longest operational U-boat mission of the entire war, surpassed only by U-196's 225 days, a grueling odyssey that pushed men and machinery to the absolute limit. Luth's tactical brilliance, combined with the boat's exceptional range and robust construction, allowed it to operate thousands of miles from any friendly base, refueling from supply ships and even milk boats in the vast emptiness of the southern oceans. The human legacy is carried primarily by Wolfgang Luth. After leaving U-181, he rose to command the Naval Academy at Muirwick and became one of the youngest flag officers in the Kriegsmarine. Tragically, Luth's life ended just days after the war's conclusion. On the night of May 13, 1945, while inspecting sentries at the Academy, he failed to respond correctly to a challenge from a German guard in the confusion of surrender. A single shot ended the career of the man who had survived countless patrols and depth-charge attacks. Luth was buried with full military honors, the last German soldier to receive a state funeral under the Third Reich. His memory lives on in naval circles as a symbol of professionalism and daring. Kurt Freiwald, who guided U-181 through its final wartime patrols and into Japanese service, survived the war and lived quietly in post-war Germany until his death in 1993. Many of the crew returned home, carrying with them stories they rarely shared, the unspoken bond of those who had lived for months in a steel tube, hunting and being hunted. Today, the wreck of U-181, known in its brief Japanese incarnation as I-501, lies scuttled in approximately 50 to 60 meters of water in the Strait of Malacca, roughly 30 to 40 nautical miles southwest of Singapore. Exact coordinates were never publicly released by the Royal Navy, and the site remains unmarked and largely undisturbed. The busy strait, one of the most heavily trafficked waterways on Earth, sees thousands of ships pass overhead every year, unaware of the silent hunter resting below. Divers occasionally report possible sightings of a large submarine wreck in the area, but poor visibility, strong currents, and heavy shipping make exploration difficult and dangerous. Unlike famous wrecks such as U-505, captured and preserved in Chicago, or Bismarck, U-181's final resting place is considered a war grave and is protected under international law. No serious efforts have been made to locate or salvage it, and it is likely to remain forever hidden beneath the murky waters it once prowled. The story of U-181 encapsulates the tragedy and terror of the U-boat war, a marvel of engineering turned instrument of destruction, crewed by men who believed they were fighting for their country's survival, yet inflicting immense suffering on merchant sailors far from the front lines. It reminds us that beneath the statistics of tonnage sunk lie thousands of individual human stories of courage, loss, and survival. As the years pass and the last veterans fade away, submarines like U-181 become relics of a vanished era, their steel hulls slowly claimed by the sea. Yet their tales endure, whispered in naval archives and recounted in channels like this one, a testament to the enduring fascination with those who went down to the sea in steel coffins, hunting in the depths during mankind's darkest hours. The submarine that sank 27 ships now sleeps quietly in tropical waters, its periscope long stilled, its torpedoes silent. The oceans have reclaimed their own.